away to their land. In return, then give us their colony. Then take our culture away from us. Then give us them culture we no understand.
There was a moment in Africa when power felt threatened, not by bullets, not by tanks, not by armies, but by sound. A sound so dangerous, it made governments nervous, and truth impossible to silence.
For me, I swear, for me, I swear, for me, I swear, as long as Africa they suffer, Africa they hungry, Africa no unite, no freedom, no justice, no happiness, them go here. Hey! Them go here.
Africa should be quiet, grateful, or invisible. In a world that expected African art to entertain politely, Fela demanded attention. He did not sing to power, he sang at it, and people listened, not just in Lagos, not just in Nigeria, but across Africa, across Europe, across the Americas, because truth has no accent. Fela was born into resistance. His mother, Funmilayo Ransome Kuti, stood against colonial authority. When doing so carried real danger. She taught him that silence is not peace. It is surrender. His father taught discipline. His home taught courage. When Fela left for London to study medicine, but on the contrary, he went for music and he expected mastery. Instead, he encountered boundaries. Western music theory was polished, but it lacked African breath. Jazz was powerful, but it did not fully speak his truth. So he returned home not to imitate the world, but to confront it. In America, Fela encountered Black consciousness. He listened to voices that spoke openly about power, race, and freedom. He realized something essential. Music does not have to be neutral. When he returned to Nigeria, Afrobeat emerged, long compositions, relentless rhythm, lyrics that refused comfort. Afrobeat was African memory meeting modern urgency. It could not be ignored, and that was the problem. The Africa Shrine was more than a venue. It was a classroom, a courtroom, a public square. Every performance felt dangerous, because it was honest. Songs were banned. Fela was arrested again and again. His home was invaded. His world was set on fire. And his mother was killed. The silence afterward could have ended everything. Instead, it forged something unbreakable. Music softened, but it did not retreat. It expanded. And this is where the world entered the story. Despite censorship at home, despite arrests, raids, and bans, Fela's sound traveled farther than the forces sent to silence it. It crossed borders. In 1969, Fela stepped onto American soil for the first time. A difficult tour, a hostile climate, but a transformative moment. In the United States, he encountered Black Power movements, Pan-African thinkers, and a language of resistance that would permanently reshape his music. He did not return home unchanged. He returned sharper, louder, unapologetic. Europe listened next. London clubs pulsed with Afrobeat, a sound that refused to fit into Western categories, and then history followed. Fela became the first African artist to perform at Glastonbury, one of the world's most influential music festivals, not as an experiment, not as a cultural token, but as a commanding presence, an African revolutionary, standing on one of Europe's largest stages, forcing the world to listen. America followed again. Musicians listened carefully, from Brian Eno and Talking Heads to Questlove, Erykah Badu, and Kendrick Lamar. Fela's influence moved quietly, then everywhere. Recognition followed, even as persecution continued. In the 1980s, Amnesty International designated Fela a prisoner of conscience, recognizing that his imprisonment was not for crime, but for truth. He was punished not for violence, but for speaking too clearly. And still, the world took note. After his passing, the recognition only deepened. In 2022, Fela was inducted into the Black Music and Entertainment Walk of Fame, placing an African revolutionary within the permanent global legacy of Black music. In 2023, Rolling Stone ranked him among the greatest singers of all time, acknowledging that his voice, raw, confrontational, unpolished, changed what singing could mean. In 2025, his 1976 album Zombie was inducted into the Grammy Hall of Fame, recognized for its lasting historical significance. It made Fela the first Nigerian artist to ever receive this honor. And in 2026, the Recording Academy announced the Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award to be honored posthumously. A final acknowledgement of a man who reshaped global music without ever asking permission.
Okay, let's go now. Ó fẹ́ ṣẹ́lù àyàkàtà, ó fẹ́ ṣẹ́gun, ó fẹ́ ṣẹ́lù, ó fẹ́ ṣẹ́gun, ó fẹ́ ṣẹ́lù, ó fẹ́ ṣẹ́gun, ó fẹ́ ṣẹ́lù.
Without ever asking permission. He was also nominated for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2021 and 2022, placing Afrobeat inside the same conversation as rock, jazz, funk, and soul. Fela did what no African musician before him had ever done. He turned music into permanent resistance. He named names, declared independence, built a commune, stood on global stages, without softening his message. No compromise records, no radio-friendly surrender, no silence for safety. Through him, Nigeria was no longer discussed only in whispers of instability. Africa was no longer background texture. To global culture, it became the source, the signal, the headline, not borrowing a voice, but setting the tempo. And the world is still listening. But the rhythm did not end with Fela. It evolved. It moved through bloodlines, through stages, through generations. Because Fela did not leave behind a single voice. He left behind a lineage. Femi Kuti, his eldest son.
As I dey rock my brains, try to understand politics. Again and again, politicians use the same tactics.
An international career on his own terms, earned multiple Grammy nominations, toured relentlessly across Europe, the Americas, Asia, and Africa, collaborated across continents, without diluting the message. Through Femi, Afrobeat stood shoulder to shoulder with the global music industry, not as a curiosity, but as an equal. Nigeria was no longer only a source of raw talent. It was a cultural authority. And then came Seun Kuti, the youngest son. Performing on global stages, collaborating with artists like Common and Black Thought, and reminding the world that Afrobeat was never meant to be comfortable. It was meant to challenge, and beyond the suns, the legacy widened. Yeni Kuti, Fela's daughter, became the guardian of the shrine, the storyteller, the cultural bridge. Through her, the memory was organized, the history was protected, the narrative was not distorted. Other children, musicians, creatives, cultural workers, each carried fragments of the same fire. Not all on stage, not all behind microphones, but all committed to keeping the spirit alive. What Fela built did not collapse after his death. It multiplied. Afrobeat became Afrobeats. The influence spread. The doors stayed open. And today, every African artist commanding global stages walks through a path first cleared by that family. Femi expanded the legacy. Seun defended it. Yeni safeguarded it. Together, they proved something rare in music history, that a revolution could outlive its founder. And through the children of Fela Anikulapo Kuti, Africa continues to speak. Confident, modern, unapologetic, still setting the tempo. Today, Afrobeat is everywhere. Africa creates it. But this is not the end of the story. Because Afrobeat, born from Fela's defiance, became one of Africa's greatest gifts to world music. A sound that proved African culture could challenge power, move crowds, and reshape global consciousness. And Fela himself became more than a musician. He became a reference point. Across the world, artists listened, they studied, they paid homage. Brian Eno called Fela a genius. David Byrne and Talking Heads carried Afrobeat into global rock. Questlove traced its DNA through modern soul and hip-hop. Erykah Badu echoed its spiritual resistance. Kendrick Lamar absorbed its political courage. From jazz to funk, from hip-hop to alternative rock. Fela's path became a blueprint, not only in Nigeria, not only in Africa, but everywhere music dared to speak truth. Every generation that uses sound to confront power walks a road Fela first cleared. And yet Afrobeat is only one chapter, because legends do not end with a genre. They live on in every artist, brave enough to follow the rhythm and speak without permission. Fela lives there. In our next video, expect a fascinating journey through African history, where culture, philosophy, and identity shaped ideas far beyond the continent, a story of influence, international impact, and a legacy the world still lives by. Africa's story was never lost. It was only unheard. Until now. If this story moved you, like this video so the truth travels further, comment below. What does Afrobeat mean to you? Subscribe to Africa, the world's stronghold, where Africa's history is restored, one truth at a time.